Hi, I hope whoever's watching this is staying safe and taking really good measures during this quarantine, and hopefully we'll be out of here soon. But however, today my article that I've been assigned is actually about WikiLeaks, which is, I think, a non-profit organization that most of us know about. If not, I'm going to give some background about it, and today's video will actually go into how WikiLeaks is not as unbiased and clear as it claims to be. WikiLeaks usually prides itself on its measures of security in terms of national security, as well as its cosmopolitan ethics, both of which have been debunked in this article today by Damien Tambini. First of all, I'm going to start by discussing how WikiLeaks and its dynamic of online journalism is actually perfect in theory. Most people who use WikiLeaks are well aware of the fact that when you publish something on the site, you do not have your IP address tracked, you do not have a username or a password set up, you don't have to include your email, nothing. There is no trace of who publishes what. WikiLeaks is meant to give people an unbiased platform. It's meant to allow people to publish any political issues, social issues, war-based issues on the internet for other journalists and for other people like readers to come and see for themselves. You're not meant to have a political agenda nor a social agenda when you publish content. Even if you have your own personal one, the content that goes on WikiLeaks is usually meant to just address things that people might be too scared to publish under a name in real life. Also, WikiLeaks basically has a plethora of advantages when it's just on the surface level. So first of all, obviously the fact that you can't trace the IP address and no one can ever really know who wrote what makes it so that you're 100% anonymous all the time, and basically ensures that you will never have to worry about people coming and like fighting you on your political opinions basically. Also, it's meant to be 100% autonomous, which means that there's no agenda behind it, or so people thought, and that they never claim that one side is better than the other, which I'll get into in the coming points. Furthermore, WikiLeaks has a system of news writing and reporting which doesn't have to follow real life journalism ethics. They don't have to sit and wonder, are these stories 100% for the public interest? Do I need to minimize potential harm to a certain political identity because in my country per se, he's something really big, but in like another country he might not matter. So they don't have to worry about who's getting what said about them. They just have to publish the content and allow the readers to take it as they please. So in a perfect world, it kind of seemed like WikiLeaks was the ideal platform for all journalism news. It felt like every single journalist could turn to WikiLeaks and would find 100% valid and unbiased news. However, most of the time, prior to 2009, the content that was on the site was actually very minimal. It didn't have much of an impact on anyone or anything. Up until in 2010, a U.S. Army analyst actually came and leaked a bunch of personal information about people onto WikiLeaks. She leaked certain like names, locations, the positions that people had within the army, the income that they received. She left no detail untouched and published it all on WikiLeaks, which caused a major uproar like globally. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was questioning Assange's personality, the way he claims that he's unbiased, the way he claims that he has no agenda against anyone, but how could he accept for such critical information to be put out there and threaten national security, basically? So this resulted in editors from the New York Times and from The Guardian, as well as many political figures, many governmental figures, coming together and meeting with Assange and his team to come up with a redaction policy. They came up with a need to like filter and censor content on WikiLeaks. They came up with new rules which would make WikiLeaks still unbiased, however more safe to use basically. So what they decided was that they would never include the names of certain like witnesses. They would never include names of a journalist who colluded with another journalist in an attempt to like have shared news, let's say. So they started to actually somewhat apply the ethics of real life journalism to this online journalism platform. In their opinion, what they were doing was simply making national security threats a minimum. They didn't want to be the news site that basically exposed certain people. They wanted to be the news site that protected them. So they tried to use journalists and editors who were skilled to actually come and like nitpick the resources before they got published. However, they still had one rule, which is that there will be journalists and editors who publish the original document with their own edits, but the original document, no matter what it is and in whatever language it is, will still be uploaded to prove to the people that they still have this utilitarian idea of, we want to bring you guys honest and unbiased news, we want to bring you guys the truth, and we don't care who gets hurt, basically. Like, our aim is not to مثلا protect a certain side. It's not to protect a governmental figure from feeling embarrassed or something. No, it's simply to protect people who are like innocent and don't deserve to be included in any of these articles. They want to protect them from being included in the final product. They don't want to expose them, basically. And that's why they came up with these new rules. In theory, it also sounds really great. Like, it sounds like that they're taking the extra measure to ensure that people won't get hurt. However, like, once it was actually applied, people began to see just how skewed their perception of censoring really was. So now that there were like a bunch of journalists who were actually responsible for editing and coming up with like the appropriate way to publish said content, people started to notice that majority of the time WikiLeaks was actually uploading way slower than it used to. At the time where people could just upload content left and right and be honest about what they had to put out there, everyone was getting the information at the same time from the same place, which is WikiLeaks. However, over time, like especially from the years of 2012 up until 2015, people started to notice that majority of news cases would come out via The Guardian or via the New York Times. Two of the newspapers who were involved in the redaction, in imposing the redaction policy on WikiLeaks, and they found that like it was always skewed towards the Western agenda. Every single news article that came out via the New York Times and The Guardian, which cited WikiLeaks as like a primary source, when you would go back to the WikiLeaks article, you would even see that it was so skewed towards accepting مثلا that the West did so and so, and the evil like eastern side or southern side did so and so. Like, it just started to become like any other news source, basically, and that is the whole point against what WikiLeaks stood for. It shifted completely in its image. Assange began to get so much backlash, and even in this article, the person said, how could you be someone who believed in cosmopolitan ethics, which is including everyone in the same way? You don't مثلا shine a light on the West as the superior, you don't shine a light on the East as a superior. No, you just publish content for what it is and people come up with their own conclusions. So how could you shift from being someone who was with that to being someone who basically prioritizes the lives of Washington citizens over Waziristan citizens? How could you be someone who basically made the West notorious once again and gave them a platform to be the amazing West, and you basically start to like shame and put the East and the like South in harm in what you're publishing? Like, you basically deface them even more. So I'm pretty sure whoever's watching this is starting to wonder, what was the point behind this article in terms of exposing WikiLeaks? Why did they need to expose WikiLeaks? Well, when it comes down to it, WikiLeaks is very pragmatic in nature. It is something that clearly serves the elite and basically works more in a practical function than it does in any other function. Because when you think about it, WikiLeaks is a horrible system of journalism, basically. You cannot hold anyone accountable. There's no way to basically track who said what. There's no way to ensure that the people who are giving you the content are actually skilled. You just have to take their word for it, basically. You just have to take the fact that they're unbiased and that they gain nothing by lying to you. But this is not the way that journalism and reporting is supposed to go. It's not supposed to be about they gain nothing by lying to you, basically. And on top of that, people who publish under the title of WikiLeaks, they never mattered before WikiLeaks started to face backlash and conflict. They only started to get this like elite title and elite status after they worked alongside two really pragmatic newspapers, which are the New York Times and The Guardian. Once they became associated with it, they were able to generate an impact based on title and status. So it no longer became like WikiLeaks was for the people, by the people, and instead it started to become it's for the West, by the West. So it started to become so elitist in its practices and elitist in its publishing that it basically shifted completely from a utilitarian type of newspaper into a completely pragmatic, news source, into a completely pragmatic news source. It did start off as a utilitarian type of news source, though. And this is what the article stresses, that WikiLeaks was meant to be unbiased, happy reporting, basically. And by happy, I don't mean like everyone was dancing around while reporting. No, I mean that people would always get the full truth and nothing but the full truth. People were meant to use WikiLeaks in an attempt to not care if you're gonna say something about the US or if you're gonna say something about the UK. You're supposed to use WikiLeaks in an attempt to just put out the truth. You're supposed to use it to basically bring the mass majority happiness and disregard the minority, which is, as we both know, or as we all know, the utilitarian perspective here. So they completely threw that away. They forgot everything that they were striving for in terms of honesty and real reporting, and started to just basically prioritize the minority of people and disregard the majority. They've shifted completely in that sense. So overall, I'd like to restate and reiterate the fact that WikiLeaks, although sounds perfect in theory, sounds like the best way to publish news and get primary news, is actually so controversial and contradicts itself in so many ways, especially in the last few years, almost decade of its existence. WikiLeaks, if it wants to be, as it claims, unbiased and natural news and everything like that, it needs to actually start from within. It needs to start from Julian Assange and take a shift all the way to the reporters who basically redact the news, and to the people who are actually able to publish and get first-hand picks at the news. Thank you.